Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is a podcast where we speak to mavericks, criminals, dangerous people of the comedy scene. People who have stories to tell that will astound us, that will shock us, that will take us to the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, today's guest has a son who's the same as me. He's half white, half Asian. He could be my dad. Uh, no, he's a man who runs comedy clubs in London and in Norwich, and he's based all the way in Norfolk. So I'm guessing it's quite near to Devon, and he's been to Land's End. He's a man who has many stories to tell, and he's a man that is the CEO, the Tony Soprano of the very dangerous comedy firm Shaft of Wit Comedy. Please welcome Kai Barron.
Hello. Well, let me just go back a little bit. And first of all, what's the criminal? What's that criminal? The criminals of the comedy world? What have you, what do
I'm
you,
joking.
what have you
I'm
found out?
joking. I don't. It just
Not
sounded
guilty.
fancy. It just sounded fancy. That's all. It
Yeah.
sounded like. I'm not saying anything. It just sounds like
Okay. Great.
catchy.
I thought I was being stitched up there that you actually got the real dirt on me. And yeah. Yeah. What else was there? Oh, comedy clubs in London. Well, I co-produce or I help with a comedy night at the Comedy Store called Craig Cabaret. So you were right about one thing, criminal things aside, and the London thing, which is not the main thing. The Norfolk thing, I did think you said it was near Devon, but that's all right. That's
It's
okay. I
not. It's
told you you
not.
couldn't
Okay.
find out
Okay.
much.
Sorry.
I told you you couldn't find out much. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So it's nearer to Devon than London.
What Norfolk? Geography wasn't your thing, was it? It's nearer to London than it is to anywhere, probably. It's the
Oh,
east
okay.
of England, over here. Great Yarmouth. Have you been to Great? Yeah, you're not a well, for somebody who's part Asian, you're not a very travelled man, are you?
I'm sorry. Already at the start of the podcast, I've caused trouble for myself. Apologies, guys, listening in.
Yeah, I'm only teasing. I'm only teasing. Love it. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I don't get invited on to things very often. You can probably tell why.
Yes. No, I'm joking. Uh, but this is he's here. He's basically, guys. I got him in. I just said, listen, I'm gonna give him the best duck, pork, and fried rice with wonton soup. I'm gonna send it to his address. I'm gonna get. That's why he's come on the podcast, guys.
Yes, that's it. That's it. That's what I'm only in it for the takeaway. That's it. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I just came from work, working in a coffee shop. Relatives, if anyone's listening in, it's not as a coffee shop. It's as a estate agent.
Yeah, don't talk. You should say I'm a barista.
Yeah, I'm a barista. I'm a
That's
barista. So
very
that
nice.
is ambiguous, okay? Cousins
That's
or
cool.
relatives listening in.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you make the coffee? Do you actually make it with one of the big machines?
Yeah. I can do latte art. I can do all sorts. I can do fill. Yeah, I can do all of it.
Yeah,
I can.
you're a
The only thing I
barista.
can't do is the swan.
Okay. Yeah,
I
yeah,
can do
yeah.
everything else.
That is a tricky one. Yeah, I bought one of those nice coffee machines where you can get like the microfoam on top. But yeah, I can't do the. It all spills over the side before you've even got any design going. But
It
that's it.
it is something that I thought was a lot harder before I could do it. But then when I got trained in one of my coffee jobs to do the heart, and then I got trained to do the leaf and the tulip. So it just I don't know. It's just doing it, and that's it.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
looks
yeah.
a lot harder than it is.
Confidence is what it needs, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm just guessing.
But anyway, let's go back to comedy and enough
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
comedy. So
Sorry. It's live, isn't it? Well, it's recording, isn't it?
so tell us, Kai, about your story about how you became a comedian, how you became a comedy promoter, and what has led you to where you are today, living in Norfolk.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's going to cover quite a span of time. I've been doing it for about 20 years now. Went to uni, did a bit of the old drama. I did the course when you didn't have to pay £9,000 for a course. back then for a year. Um, that was uni, and that was in London at Brunel, and finished that. And then I became a. I went over to Germany actually. I met my now wife at uni all those years ago. This back in 1992. So it's quite a long time ago. When were you born?
1 year before that, mate.
Wow. So yeah, so you were just barely walking, I guess. And yeah, so that was the start. Went off. I was a street performer. I didn't speak German, but I could do mime and things, which is a little bit of what you're into, isn't it? The old mime and
Yeah.
clowning. So I was doing that to pay for cigarettes and alcohol, and staying over there doing that for a year, a couple of years on and off. Came back to the UK, did a bit of theatre, one man shows and things like that. And one day, a man came up to me after a performance and said, "Oh, you should come and try stand-up comedy. We do it on I think it was on a Sunday, in Bristol. It's a place called the Bunch of Grapes, and he was the landlord." And I thought, that sounds like quite a scary step into the unknown. And so I did try it. I got the number. It was a promoter at the time who was really quite supportive of open mics, and that was Mark Olver, who now works for the BBC New Comedy Awards. I think he's a producer, but he is Mr. Comedy, just simmering away there, just out of the spotlight somewhat. And that was where it started. It was on my birthday. I think it was about 2003. It must have been, or 2002. Um, Went along. I had 5 minutes of material and a card trick, I think, at the time, or maybe that came later. But I had about 5 minutes of material, and went and just did it, and haven't looked back. Um, Without seeming to drop a name in there, on that night, there was an act who was closing the show for about 30 quid, just starting out himself, and that was Russell Howard. So
Yeah.
that was my first step into it. So I probably had one of the better open mic introductions that you can get, really. Kept doing the same 5 minutes over and over and over again, which probably got a bit boring, but they always put me on. And that was the start of it, really. Yeah, scary stuff.
And what was it like? What was it like sharing the stage with Russell Howard? What I mean, was he as credible as he is now? And what was it? Yeah,
Yeah,
how did? Yeah,
I mean, he was brilliant then. He'd been going a couple of years probably at the time, but yeah, I mean, that was incredible. I didn't know what he was going to become that back then, but everybody sort of knew he was, yeah, probably the best in class. And yeah, that happened a few times. He was on it with a bunch of grapes, and um, it was quite a good time back then because there was a real scene in Bristol, and it was there were a group of comedians that came through around that time, including people like John Robbins and John Richardson, particularly, and Will Hodgson. So they were quite regular feature on the open circuit back then. Yeah, they've all done really well. Will became best newcomer at the Edinburgh Festival some years later, and now he runs a barber shop in Cheltenham. Oh no, Chippenham. Sorry. Yeah, yeah. He's a real character. You might not have come across him if you've sort of come to the party slightly later, but that was the Bristol part. Then I had children. They were travelling up and down the country doing their thing and doing very well. Then I moved down to Torquay and started a little club there, a place called the Dickens Bar, just on the um, just on the seafront there in a hotel. I think it was a Davenport Hotel or something like that. And there was a little bar behind, and I just went in and put a little night on, £5 on the door. And the first gig, I was thinking about this the other day. The first person on the stage was a relatively new. He'd been going a couple of years, but a relative newcomer called Patrick Monaghan,
hmm.
who I still book to this day. He's one of my oldest friends in comedy now. And another actor on at that time was Ian Cognito, Cogs, who is legendary. Sadly, not with us anymore. Great loss. to the comedy community. But that was the first gig I did there, and yeah, went on every month for about a year or so. Yeah, good times. Really enjoyed it.
Mm. Yeah. What what was the what was the comedy style back then compared to what it is now? Because I
The
know that,
style,
yeah,
um, in terms of the scene, or in terms of what people, yeah, well, how people sort of treated it,
yeah,
and functioned in the industry. It was very different. I think acts were prepared to travel really good acts were still prepared to travel a lot further. It was before we had the real use of the internet and Facebook and things like that. We're talking 2004. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't quite what it is today in terms of how we communicate and book acts. So, yeah, telephone, they travelled a lot. Mirth Control were quite prominent down there at the time. Um, I was getting compare spots, and so I was able to go down into Plymouth and Cornwall and Exeter and all around that sort of area to work as MC. But you'd get acts coming from miles around. Um, yeah, I mean, they'd come from the Midlands down all the way down into to Plymouth to do a spot for yeah relatively little money as it was. But nowadays, I think, and we were talking about this beforehand, weren't we? I think there are a lot more promoters around, and so they don't have to travel quite as far to get the stage time. Because really, at the sort of lower levels of the industry, that's really what they're looking for: as much stage time in front of as many people as they can in order to craft their material.
yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, I'd say that was probably the big difference. You phoned people and texted them rather than go on and message them online. And you didn't quite have an abundance of acts to choose from. You had to sort of network and get numbers off people and so on. And email, of course, was a thing, but we didn't use it then as much as we do now.
hmm,
Well, I didn't anyway.
no. But it was a lot easier. So maybe was it also easier to get people into comedy shows back then?
Audiences,
Yeah.
well, I was lucky it was Torquay, which didn't have much going on at the time. They've got a lot more now. There was one Mirth Control gig in Torquay at a place called the Cocoa Lounge, and I saw lots of great acts there that I still book today. Um, in fact, I recall one time when I went there specifically to see an act that I'd heard a lot about, and that was Gary Delaney. And he was jobbing around doing the Mirth Control circuit back then. Um, Last weekend, I booked him to do one of my bigger theatre double gigs in Wisbech, and yeah, he is an absolute master at what he does. I cannot tell you how hard his jokes hit from start to finish. He is on fire. That was amazing because I don't think he'll mind me telling you this. When he did the gig, he didn't go down quite so well as he does now, because he'd only been there a few weeks before, and that was, I think, really what was one of the faults of that area at the time. Acts were willing to go down, but if they've got the same material, it was the same audience at the time, so he didn't go down quite as well. And yeah, I think compared to what he's doing now, he is, yeah, as I say, a master. He's really worked hard, and he's, yeah, without doubt, one of the best, if not the best, at the one-liners now.
Hmm. Yeah, he's incredible. I'd love to get him on the pod and chat to him. I hear he's a great guy as well. I hear he's very friendly, very, very, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he is. The audience love him. He gets the job done, but he's also, yeah, good company backstage as well. So we had at the weekend we had Adam Bloom as well. Have you had Adam on the pod yet?
I know that every Tom, Dick, and Harry with a podcast
Yeah,
has interviewed him about his book. I
true.
think it's true, isn't it? Everyone
It
has.
seems to be, but yeah, that's because he's actively pushing the book as well a little bit. He Yeah, I mean, he's such a nice bloke as well. I mean, you should, yeah, get him on. I've got a lot of time for him. He's great. It's
I
quite
think
intense.
I know that he's incredible. I watched a bit of him on the "You Should Have Been Here Last Week" podcast, and he's very so precise with comedy. and like yeah, he
Yeah,
really knows. It's incredible what he knows.
yeah,
I
yeah,
would like to get him on, but I think I'll do it probably maybe next year or the year after because I don't know. Everyone's done him already, so I
yeah.
want to sort of do it a bit later on whilst I've got
Make
other
sure you
things
read the
around.
book, though. Make sure you read the book cover to cover, because you'll say, "I liked your book," and he'll say, "Yeah, what did you like about it?" And you'll say, "Oh, I liked the thing about the balloon. Yeah, yeah, but what is it particular that you liked about it? Was it this? Was it that?" Yeah, and he'll make sure that you've yeah, make sure you've done your homework because he gets the answers out of you. He's great.
Does he not tolerate any BS? Because I remember I was working in a bar during one of
Yeah.
these corporate gigs, and I don't know what it is, but at the time I seemed to rub him up the wrong way.
No, I don't think. No, he just says what. Yeah, he just says what he thinks. Really, he's not in a rude way. I think he likes to be very clear about what's being said to him and what's yeah, um, what he's sharing as well. He just has to be very precise, and so no, don't take it as being annoyed with you. Yeah, he just wants to make sure that everything that you say is clear in his head. So he might just grill you on it, and if it isn't, he will ask you more questions, and you might think, "Hang on a minute, yeah, no, he's awesome. He really is."
What what's it? So you've been in the circuit for over 20 years.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
this is my 20th year since I started putting gigs on. I started doing comedy shortly before that. I had a little bit of beginner's success with So You Think You're Funny semi-finals. That was exciting, going up to Edinburgh at the Tivoli, um, performing there. And that was the year, I think that was the year Tom Wrigglesworth won. I think it was 2005 or 6, something like
okay.
that. Um, I became a teacher, and while I was training to be a teacher, I did the student comedy awards as well for Chortle, and got through to the finals of that, and rubbed a few people up the wrong way because they didn't think I was a proper student like they were,
Ah.
because I was just doing the year PGCE, but it qualified anyway, so I'll take it.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so 20 years, man and boy.
What what's so you split down the middle, don't you? You perform a lot and you run a lot of gigs, a bit like James Alderson.
No, well, yes and no. I do compare with varying degrees of success my own gigs. I don't really do much beyond that. I don't have to now, but it was my way, putting a gig on really and comparing. It was my fix for comedy. I didn't have the is it the motivation, I suppose, or the drive, and I had a family, to be traveling up and down the country doing gigs for, yeah, for nothing, let's say, like the ones that, like the comedians that are now doing really well for themselves. They deserve every bit of it, and that's why I've got a lot of respect for any act that um, has any degree of success. And it's good to see open mics or beginners still willing to travel miles to get a gig in front of a new audience, and that's how they that's how they master what they're doing, is by driving miles, dying on their ass, but doing it again and again, and then making it better and then improving. So I didn't do that. So I put gigs on, and I was able to get my fix for performance, which is, that's the little bit in me from the performing arts days and things like that, where um, comparing it is a nice little sort of happy medium, and getting to meet all the acts and giving them the platform to do what they do. Um, and I make them look very good, let's say. It doesn't matter because I'm not very good. They come on after me, and it's always a relief. But I have sort of varying degrees of success. When I'm funny, it's good night. But when I'm not very funny, I can at least just walk off the stage and bring somebody else on. That's the beauty of being a compere. And the reason for that is also because they're small gigs, and paying a compare would mean, um, yeah, it would just mean that I'd be doing it for nothing really. So you want to get a bit of something in return for putting them on, of course.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like a you want some money also to fund for future gigs, like in terms of the advertising, the
yeah,
yeah.
that's it. Yeah, I always had one gig. Wherever I lived, I always found a bar and put a gig on, wherever it was. And so it went from Torquay, got a job teaching across in Yeovil in Somerset, and found a place there. I had about three or four over time. They come and go. And then about 10 years ago, roughly, I moved across to Norfolk for a job as a teacher, head of drama at a school in near to where I live here, and had a little break because I was busy doing that. And there was already a gig in this small town. It's a market town in Norfolk called Loddon. There was a mirth control um, provided gig, and that had been going, was quite well established. When that stopped, I then took a pub round the corner and yeah, started it back up again. And I suppose I got some of their audience, which was good. There were obviously a fair few people in the area that liked comedy, and went since then I haven't really looked back again. So that was probably 2019. Then the pandemic hit, and we managed just to keep it going, supported the venue, and kept gigs going in all sorts of kind of formations, 2 meters here, under canvas, and all sorts of things. And that was about 2019. That was the first one. Now I've got about sort of 13 or 14 venues. So in the last 6 months, really, well, no, in the last maybe year, it's gone from one and then a couple, and then of regulars, every 2 months. Um, and now I've got about 13 or 14 venues that I put comedy in, which is really exciting. It's a lot of work. So I sort of put the teaching away and in March and decided I would try it full time, and then stepped it up to doing some theatres.
How how do you manage booking that many shows, like, and not like make sure that the lineup's all good, make sure that yeah, and keeping a return audience. I mean, yeah. How do you manage that all?
Yeah. Well, it's not 13 gigs all at once. Some are every 2 months, 3 months, and then another venue might come on and do two a year or three a year and so on. Um, but having your favourites is a good start. Having your favourite comedians that you've worked with a lot and that are funny, of course. I've got some really great comedians who I've been booking for years and years, right from the start. Like I said, Patrick Monahan, who was first on the stage. I mean, he's coming back again next week. I've probably booked him about 5 times in the last 12 months or more. And it's having acts like that who are willing to come and do your gigs, partly because, of course, it's a gig and they've got the time. But there is a little element of it's not loyalty, it's friendship and kind of and trust, and they just like hanging out as well. Some of them, so they'll come up, they'll just say yes. Some of them say yes without even talking about how much it is. So it's nice when that happens. But having a good core of acts that you can trust and building on that. But now it's getting fairly easy. I mean, you have the internet as well, like Facebook. I've got a gap for one on Saturday. It's an open spot in the middle. But now you can go on Facebook and just say, I need an act, and you'll be inundated. There's a lot of people out there looking for gigs, and so it's quite easy to fill them. But yeah, you need to be organised. I do leave it sometimes a little too late, but if you book ahead and fill up the bills as much as you can, then yeah, I mean it's nice to know it's sorted, and then you've only got to sort of firefight if somebody pulls out or whatever. But um, yeah, doing them one at a time is also important. You can't do them all at once, uh, and also doubling them up. If I've got a gig on a Friday and a Saturday, which I have this weekend, um, I'm not doing it this weekend actually. Doubling people up, but bring them in on a Friday. They can stay at mine, and then doing the Saturday gig as well. They quite like that. Bit of extra money. They don't have to travel. Um, it's good for them, some of them, but it doesn't always work out like that. Yeah, it's a lot of comedians. It's a lot of work for a lot of comedians, which is great. That's the thing I like about it as well.
Hmm. what what's it? I know that James Alderson says that a lot of comedy promoters should. I'm not misquoting him, but he's mentioned that with a lot of comedy gigs, people need to take a big risk and go and book for bigger theatres and go for it to really make something for of it, like for not just for the acts but for
As a
yourself.
promoter, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I've just started to do. So for 20 years, I've been doing these little pub gigs, and they will never get you rich. Not that I've gone into it with that in mind at all, but they will never, you know, with the best will in the world, they will never really um, give you a return that you can sustain yourself with, because these are rooms of about 50 or 60 people, paying 10, 50, 10, 12 quid a head. You only have to have 10 empty seats if you're putting on good lineups. I mean, it's easy. You can have open mic nights, and the costs are very low, and potentially, there is some return there if you get a good crowd in. However, you are more likely to get a better, more appreciative audience with a quality lineup. And so when you're only talking 50 seats, 60 seats for the pubs, you've got to be spending, especially in Norfolk, you've got to be spending 300, £400 on the lineup. And so you can see the margins are really tight there. It depends how you do it. And some people would do it cheaper, but if you want quality acts, you've got to pay for your lineup, really. The audience will come back to that. It only takes a couple of really terrible gigs for people to possibly feel like stand-up comedy in pubs isn't really a great night out, let's say. And if you've got gigs on and there's only half a dozen people there, or it's an open mic night, they are I value them because they give everyone a platform to kind of find their feet in the industry. But yeah, there are good ones and there are not so good ones, I would say, and the not so good ones do affect the good ones, and that can have a knock-on effect to the pro lineups as well. I would say, yeah. What was the question?
No,
Yeah, it was along that lines, wasn't it? Yeah.
the point is, I was saying that. So you agree with what James always says? There's you need to with gigs go big or go home, and like go and book theatres and really sort of go for it rather than playing it safe in small pubs. And you said you agree with that because a lot of pubs you're not really going to make much of a living out of
No,
it.
I agree. If you, yeah, I agree. If you want to make money, if it's a business, if it's business you're doing it for, and I have gone into it more full time now, then yes, that's where the money is at. However, I won't be stopping doing and taking on the smaller gigs, because the way I've sort of structured it is, having the smaller gigs builds communities of people, smaller communities. So each gig has its own very unique kind of demographic, often, who are sometimes loyal to that pub or wherever it is, the club. Um, and they don't want to travel that far for their entertainment. So having a decent comedy club on the doorstep is a really good way of bringing people together. So when you put on the theatre gigs, you've kind of got quite a good captive audience to feed those gigs, and they do support it because the theatre or whatever is somewhere near to where the pubs are. That does have a knock-on effect that people then prefer the bigger gigs over the pub gigs, and so capacity can sometimes, yeah, not be where you want it to be. But um, I think there is a place to have both of those things running side by side. Yeah, that's what I would say. So I've got lots and lots of little gigs in a relatively small area in the east of England, and yeah, each one of them's got a few hundred people that come and go, and they also cross over into all the other little pubs, and that's how you build your brand. I would say you build it through making contact with those people. I compare them. You get to meet them all. They enjoy what they see. They like quality um, comedy in their local pub back room, and they're more likely to come and support you when you do step it up. But
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would
I've
say James
noticed
is
that.
right. Yeah, if you want to make a lot of money, yeah, yeah, you can step it up and do 700 seaters, whatever it is. But you've still got to fill them up, and the acts don't come um, for the same price they would for a pub gig. That's for sure.
Oh yes, yes, yes. But yeah. Well, so, but you mentioned an interesting thing as well. You said that every gig affects how comedy is perceived. Do you think that bad gigs could? Well, no, this is obviously something we said, but how important do you think it is for gigs to be run well in comedy, for like stand up as a
Oh,
whole?
it's essential. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're not going to promote it well and go out looking for people to fill it up, it's all very well finding a venue and saying, let's have a comedy night. Nobody tells you it's a bad idea ever. The landlord will tell all our locals and they'll say, there's a comedy night. And they'll go, or they'll say, shall we have a comedy night? And nobody tells you it's a bad idea. But when push comes to shove, a very, very few of them actually stick their hand in the pocket and buy a ticket. And some promoters will leave it up to the pub to do that. And it's very hard when they're busy. It's very hard for a pub to fill up a comedy room. They can put a band on and people will come in for free. But when you're charging for a ticket, it's a very different kind of dynamic takes place. And so you've got to, if you want to have an audience and you want the acts to be paid and it not coming out of your own pocket, you've got to go out and find the audience. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're going to end up with gigs that A, cost you a lot of money and you won't be doing for very long, but also you'll end up doing gigs, putting them on for 10, 15 people, because by the time it comes around, it's cheaper just to do it than pay any cancellation fees. 10 or 15 people in a room with a really good lineup does nobody any favors. It's atmospherically, it's poor. The acts don't enjoy it because they've come, some of them have driven 3 or 4 hours out of London to Norfolk, for example. They're not going to have a great time. They're going to take the money, but it's not. You want the act to go away feeling like they've actually achieved, their goal of having a good night and entertaining an audience. But the audience are also going to go away thinking, well, that wasn't really a great gig. When you've got 50 people in a room, it's a very different, very, very different experience all round. Yeah. And they're more likely to come back. Whereas if there's 10 or 15, let's say, and it hasn't been promoted well, those people feel like maybe, um, yeah, they've been shortchanged a bit. Because that's not what you advertise, is it?
No, no.
Certainly not. Yeah, you advertise it's been a great night of comedy. And some gigs for 10 or 15, yeah, they can be some really special moments. But from a promoter's point of view, as I say, people don't always go out in the market towns and villages looking for a comedy night like they might in London. You've got to go out and find them. And how you do that is either flyers, posters, uh, or social media.
But th
Yeah,
people say that on the flip side of that, in these market towns, people said that the gigs are easier to fill because there's less going on. In London, there's so much going on that it's harder to put on a good show. And I've seen that even when I was in
yeah,
Italy with the theatre showcase we did. It was very easy for us to fill that show because there's not really much going on in that town, even though they didn't really advertise
yeah.
it, go out really advertising it. They did a few flyers in there, but it was packed.
Yeah, and that is one of the benefits of doing the smaller villages and towns. Although some people still don't think their village pub is going to be hosting a quality night of comedy, even if I've got three professional acts and the headliner does the comedy store every month. They still associate because they don't know the comedian because they don't do a lot of comedy. If they haven't heard of them, they associate that with them not being funny, and it's very hard for to get over that. They associate comedy with a name off the telly or whatever. Um, that's yeah, and anybody else can't possibly be that funny if you haven't heard of them, which we know is not true. But they do come out and they do come back, but you've still got to go out and find them. I've got two gigs. I've got Friday and Saturday this week, and they're probably about half full, and it's Thursday today. Whereas um, there used to be a time when there was a lot more people coming. So I'm putting some of that down to the fact I do some bigger gigs in the area, and I think people are choosing to go and see those over going to see some of the pub gigs. But once again, you've got to keep plugging away. I've got a decent mailing list, and you just sometimes just plead them and say, look, you don't say use it or lose it, but that's really what you're implying in the email. It's kind of like, we really need you to come and fill some of these seats. And they sort of get the message. They want it. They just need a little kick up the backside sometimes to remind them it's on. Yeah, it's a bit like that. So we had one gig, when was it? About a fortnight ago. The first one had 90 people in. Pretty much everybody went away. It was Arthur Smith was headlining. It's a lovely lineup. Um, 90 people went away really happy. Said, yeah, I can't wait for the next one. Put the next one on. Four of those people returned, and another about sort of 25 or 30. And new people came. But that wasn't what I was expecting. I was at least expecting, another 10 or 15 of those people to come back. But it just doesn't happen. You need to communicate and remind them it's on. Yeah, that's part of the job of the promoter, isn't it? Finding new ways to reach people. And I use Facebook a lot um, as my platform, which it's effective, but there are far more people that don't use Facebook than do. And I've just started now finding new ways of reaching those people using Instagram. Um, I think Threads is another one. There's TikTok, believe it or not, is still going, but it's um, what I'm being advised that that's an area to go in. But also places like Nextdoor has a lot of people in the local area who aren't using Facebook, and tapping into that is also another way of reaching people who weren't looking at the adverts before. But I'm learning all that. It's just a safe space. It felt like the path of least resistance, really. Facebook. You just kind
Yeah,
of it's easy. It's in front of you. You're on it all the time. Stick an advert on, and that's an enigma in itself, isn't it? You know, the
yeah.
mystery of Facebook advertising. I don't think I've ever cracked it, but you always keep trying. And yeah, just finding new ways of reaching them is really important because there were more people, as I say, not using it. Good old fashioned flyers work,
Oh, yeah, they
definitely.
do.
Um, so if you are a promoter thinking that flyers are old school and outdated, um, yeah, definitely get yourself a bunch and see the difference. It does work.
What what's been the biggest surprising new way of advertising that you've used recently? If you're okay with us sharing it,
Ooh.
that isn't flying.
No, it's good. I mean, anything that I don't think I'm doing anything. I will say I'm not doing. I don't feel that special as a promoter. I mean, I do feel like filling up rooms. Not it's not for everyone. Not everyone gets it right. But what I do is nothing, nothing unique or special. Um, I think you. What what's the? Do you say a new way or? Yeah, well, I've gone back to flyers. That to me is something I haven't done for many years. That was a good one. Um, I think to fill up rooms at the end of a gig, offering tickets for a tenner when they're normally 13 quid, you've got a room full of people who've had a good night. A good way of getting a head start for the following month is just to give them a cheap ticket that only they can have, and they like that. They go to the bar and they can pay their bills or whatever and settle their tabs and get a ticket. That to me is a really effective way of advertising it. Certainly, because the internet, there's so much stuff going on, you just scroll past a lot of it. But when you've got people there, yeah, I mean that's a good way of um, getting people to commit, having them on the night and giving them something that's actually worth doing because they sort of know they're going to come. Um, Having a box office where you book in advance is essential, I think. I used to do tickets on the door once upon a time, but if it rained, most people would decide to stay at home.
Yeah.
So having people commit, yeah, I mean, they'll say, yeah, I'm coming, and you think you've got a room full of people, and then it might snow, and suddenly it's you with a man with a dog on a string, and that's about it. And that's kind of um, something I would say all promoters should be looking at, getting their ticket platform sorted so that people have a place to go and it's safe. And it costs a few quid, but per ticket, but it's worth it. Definitely worth it to at least have the commitment there.
So no tickets on the door.
I don't even I don't even suggest it. If somebody turns up on the door, but as soon as you start telling people, oh yeah, you can come on the door, they'll believe they can come on the door. So um I'll have a pub, and I insist that they don't do that. They always do though. They say, yeah, just turn up. You should be able to get in. And inevitably, unless you've got their money in your hand, they're not. There's a high likelihood they're not going to turn up. They might have had a few drinks and said, "Oh yeah, put me 2 tickets behind the bar," and before you know it, there's 10 tickets behind the bar, and you phone the pub, and they'll say, "Yeah, we've got 10." You turn up on the night, and there's 8 of them haven't picked their ticket up or paid for it. It makes sense, doesn't it? Commit to it, get the money off them, and until you've got it, I don't even count it. To be fair, yeah, it's a bonus if they do turn up, but rarely you won't. Yeah, rarely do they. Um, yeah, and the pubs learn that over time, and so they just point them in my direction because I've got a box office. But yeah, yeah, that's how it works for me.
And what about with regards to booking a lineup and making sure it's good? Because I know that what's it called? Different promoters have said different things to me. Like Nodding Dog have said that he bills from the front. He bills it based on the headliner he has. I know that
Yeah,
Spiky Mike likes to add a lot of variety to it. He's really keen on magicians and straight stand-ups. And I know that in the New York Comedy Club, um, Candy Claire says that she's very stand-up focused. She doesn't want any alternative, like straight stand-up. That's
okay,
her.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
she's into. What's your sort of ethos and thing for booking acts?
I've kind of got two models. I've got one which is theatres and very big rooms, which are a slightly different beast. But for the pub gigs, it's built around the audience for me. I get lots and lots of acts who would like to do my gigs, but I I'm unable to book some of them simply because I know that they're not quite what the audience will go for. If they're a bit too sweary, or a bit too crude, or and I know it sounds like I'm being a bit of a prude there, but um, my audiences are in the villages, especially um, fairly middle-aged, 40s plus. A lot of them. I don't have a very young audience at all. Uh, so I build it around them. It's what's suitable for them. So a lot of my acts are, um, I'd say, very experienced is probably the polite way to put it. They're very, really experienced acts that connect with that sort of demographic. Um, you always go for a decent quality headliner, regardless. I like to have a bit of variety in there as well. So rather than three straight stand-ups, I'll try often to find something that's a little bit different. For the bigger gigs, having something in the middle which breaks up. So you have somebody who's fairly high energy at the start to give them a little kick up the backside and get them started. In the middle, you might have um, somebody like Duncan Oakley was one recently, musical comedy. Um, he's a one-man variety act. Is Duncan had Mitch Benn on another one? Fantastic. Something that just sort of gives a bit of variety, I suppose, in the same way. Um, uh, you might get that on the variety circuit. Lots of different kind of different acts or character act. I won't have two character acts on. Similarly, I won't have two musical acts on because I only have three main performers. So yeah, musical acts will say, yeah, promoters say they won't put two musical acts on, and they disagree. Of course they would. They're a musical act, and they get turned down sometimes. But yeah, I just think having three that are different. So two one-liner comedians on the same bill, save it. Use them another time. I would say. Um, that's kind of how I. Yeah, it's a subconscious thing, I suppose. But you know what you're not going to book sometimes. Then once you've got the headliner, um, but a quality headliner as well. You don't want. For me, they come out, they have a good old drink. By the time the headliner's on, it's usually about 10:30. And for some people, they've had their comedy by then. They can go off the boil a little bit at times if they just want to drink and get back in the bar. And they've already had like two decent acts. And so the headliner is, um, they don't really know who they are, even though they're brilliant. And so you've got to get somebody who's gonna grab it by the balls, really. And yeah, you don't want to have them thinking too much at that time of night. You don't want anything that's a little bit too clever, let's say, and political, or long stories you've got to keep up with. So you kind of uh, yeah, you go with an act that's punchy and um, yeah, gets maximum laughs, I suppose. Um, Again, Gary Delaney's a classic example of that. You know, absolutely. Not only do people come for him, of course, but gag after gag after gag. If you get a decent act like that headlining, and there are lots of them. Stephen Cookson's brilliant. Don't know if you've come across him. Acts like that who have just got very fairly simple at its core, but very clever at the same time. One-liners. Then yeah, the audience are more likely to maintain concentration because they've only got to think for about 20 seconds at a time before the next gag comes along. And that's followed with laughter. That's what you want at the end of a good night.
Hmm. What are some horror stories you've witnessed at running your own gigs or seeing at other people's gigs that have taught you what not to do at gigs?
Oh, yeah. Well, as the person that hosts my own gigs, I'm usually the person responsible for, maintaining some sort of attention and order. And I've got that wrong a few times. I think early on, I'm going back quite a long time. I mean, nowadays the acts are strong enough that I can just sort of step away. I'll have a go, and if it's funny, it's good. But I like to have a go, let's say, and when it works, it's lovely. But at least I can then sort of step away and give it to somebody who um, can pick up the baton and at least sort of lift it a bit more if I haven't quite got it right. But a few years back, well, many years back now, probably about um, before I came here, so probably about 12 years ago, I had a gig which was near to a Navy base in Yeovil, HMS Heron in Yeovilton. And a lot of the matlow, I don't know if you've heard of the term matlows, they're sailors. They go off doing, patrolling the oceans and so on. Anyway, they had just come back off a tour, or they'd all got back together. And so they were in, and they were being quite rowdy, raucous, um, and spoiling it, let's say. We had an act go up, and they kind of were taking, yeah, they took an instant dislike to them. And the act said, well, do you want me to just go then? Was just a throwaway line. And there was a pause, just a fraction of a second, where it all just went silent for a moment. And he took that as a signal to just go. So he put the mic down and walked off, uh, which created a bit of a kerfuffle. And I went on and I sort of pointed out the fact that they were ruining it and almost turned the rest of the audience against them. And the senior officer who was there stood up and walked out. And they took that as a sign that they were going to get a bollocking the next day, I think, because they were all then all up in the air. So it all started kicking off. They were coming up. They were going, why did you say that? Why did you say that? We've taken bullets for you. We've taken bullets for you. They've just come back from Afghanistan. We've taken bullets for you. Um, and yeah, I just said, yeah, but that doesn't give you the right to ruin the gig for everyone, and the audience were pissed off as well. And that was terrifying, to be honest, because I didn't know which way it was going to go. Because they were drunk, emotional, and I think they were going to get a beasting when they get back to the camp because the senior officer had gone out quite embarrassed by it all, and they meant to be on their best behaviour in town when they are in town. So that to me was that taught me quite a lot about how not to do it. You know, if you there are better ways, and I wasn't skilled enough at the time to do it. I'm probably not now either. But yeah, yeah, you don't want to fight to break out between the military and your punters, do you? In a nice little sleepy market town. That's the last thing you set up a comedy night for.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there was that.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen in comedy. Though, I mean, but it happened. The dodgy thing like that happens at comedy gigs with all the ones you run. I reckon they probably happen once a year or once every couple of years,
What,
at
things like
least.
that? Yeah, yeah, it is a rarity, and you don't really get it in the little sleepy places here. You might get one or two people who are just a little bit drunk and don't really know how to behave, but it doesn't stretch much beyond that. I don't recall one happening here. Um, no, not for years anyway. But that taught me about, not antagonizing people that are already not having their best night going. You're better off just kind of pacifying them or giving them a bit of attention, but not too much. But yeah, it's horrible when that happens because the atmosphere just changes. Yeah, that's not what you need.
And what about with other gigs you've been to, or like, yeah, what are horror stories you witnessed there? I know that one Donald Mackerel told me a story about Gareth Berliner, where some guy was drunk and was gonna throw it. Well, he threw a chair at him once, and then Gareth Berliner said, "Look, we just relax, calm down, really nicely and stuff." And then just as about to, the drunk guy throws the chair at him again, and then Gareth Berliner does the sign and goes, "I'm gonna go and finish the gig." And then apparently the promoter, I don't know who it was, said, "Oh, you got 10 more minutes, please."
Yeah, yeah. Uh, That's a yeah. If you're having chairs thrown at you, it's not a great.
No,
Yeah, it's not a great sign that you're going to end on a high, is it?
no.
It doesn't matter how many bankers you've got in you. Um, no, I don't think. I mean, no, I don't think I've had anything that bad. I don't think violence has broken out. I've had a guy who, when I was in Yeovil, um, what tends to happen is if you have a place and you make people feel too welcome, sometimes they feel like and they come back time and time again. Over time, they feel like it's their gig, or they have some sort of ownership over it. It's their place. So you start to see over time that they get a bit more rowdy and a little bit more controlling. But there was one guy who this was in Yeovil, and he came up and he was chatting to me and uh, revealed that he had a tattoo on here, and it just said "CUNT" was the tattoo. I won't say the word because it's offensive. He had the word on his forearm there, um, and I think it was on. Yeah, he had it sort of tattooed because he said because. Uh, yeah, because he's a bit of one, basically. And anyway, he started to get quite noisy, and he was one of those that had been coming back time and time again. And we had security at the time on the door, and I asked the security to have a word, and they didn't want to because I think he was a bit of a local hard man, and I don't think they wanted to go there really, and they wouldn't even speak to him. And I was telling them, I was going, look, he's ruining it. I'd been doing this gig for months, and it was a Sunday gig. Um, and the guy who runs the bar goes out on a Sunday. They used to call it Super Sunday, where they'd go on a pub crawl, they'd get pissed, and then he came back to the bar. He'd get in just towards the end of the show, and then he'd sit at the other end of the bar, talking really loudly with his mates after a few drinks, and that didn't help matters either. So I'm saying to the landlord, or the bar owner, about this guy. I'm saying to the security about this guy. The gig finished and they didn't do anything about it, and I was getting really frustrated. Um, and then I got back after, and yeah, kind of ruined it. Um, got back home after, and I had a message to giving me a bollocking for telling the security what to do, uh, and they just didn't want to go there. The same gig, we had one more the following month, and the gig was a great lineup. It was Andrew Lawrence was closing it. Patrick Monahan was on opening. John Richardson was in the middle in his early days, and Andrew Lawrence closing. Because I'd seen Andrew Lawrence and he was piss your pants funny when I saw him. I thought, got to have him on. And he nearly started a fight with the same bloke in the audience. Uh, and it started going downhill, but he wouldn't get off, and he kept, yeah, as I say, kept pushing it, pushing it. And again, the audience were all against Andrew, and he was just lapping it up and making it worse and worse and worse. And it was at that point I thought this isn't really going as well as I thought it might in terms of a gig. The landlord was sat at the bar doing nothing again as the audience were kicking off. I mean, I've got to blame the act on this occasion, but yeah, it was all kicking off. Uh, that's probably about the three times, I suppose, when we've had yeah, when we've had a little bit of a touch and go situation. Um, yeah, not to be repeated though, in terms of an experience. Yeah.
Fingers
I mean, I'm
crossed.
not a very good storyteller. You probably noticed. I'm not the best at telling stories. I'm sure there's more into it. I'm sure I could put more into that
Oh no, I love these
when
stories
I'm
already.
recording.
I like these. These are great
Yeah,
stories. I like them.
I
Um,
would I would book Andrew Lawrence again. I think he's quite exciting now, even though he's been cancelled. I feel sorry for the bloke, to be fair. I don't share his views, but as a comedian, he's uh, yeah, he always was, and he still is a brilliant comedian. But you can see it's taken its toll on him. Yeah,
it would do on
in
anyone, I
terms of
think.
what happened. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not surprised. I, I'm not going to go into the cancel culture thing. I think it's a
No,
can
no,
of
no, no.
worms.
Please don't. Honestly, I'm the yeah. I just tie myself up. Uh, as I say, I don't support his views in terms of uh, yeah, what he said or whatever. I don't give a shit. Funny's funny, and actually, he's still a brilliant comedian.
Yeah,
Can't take that away from someone, can you?
yeah. No, you can't. I think yeah, it's like with Michael Jackson. I thought he was a bit of a dodgy man, or even P Diddy. They're good at what they do, but they're maybe not the best of people.
What does he do? What does he do?
No, we're
I've
not
heard of what he
going
does.
into that. We're not going into that. I don't want to know what he
What
does.
does what does P Diddy do? Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you can't take away their talents, but yeah, probably want to take away the probably want to take yeah take away the dildos from P
Fucking
Diddy. I think
yes.
they've done that.
No, there,
Yeah.
there's a not with them, not with them. But I'm saying sometimes one of the things that does go on is if someone says bad thing, if enough people say bad things about one person, you're going to have that perception of them. But unless, but what if your experience that person is very good and you know them for a while? How?
Yeah, tough one, isn't it? I think as a promoter, you do have to be careful. You don't want to become that promoter who is who people avoid because you made a decision that enough people didn't agree with or disagreed with there. Um, when it's somebody you know, I don't know. For example, I don't know Andrew Lawrence that well. Booked him a couple of times, but um, actually, there has been a situation where there was a lot of people saying a lot of stuff. It was not, in my opinion, it's um, nothing that serious in the bigger picture. However, there were a lot of people um, turning away from that person, um, that comedian. It's a weird one because you kind of still book them because what they've done only it affects a certain number of people in a very small um, part of the industry. But you do have to be really careful that you don't, as a promoter, blacklist yourself by just saying fuck it, I'm going to go and do what I want. It's not up to you, because some people do behave appallingly and have done. And I suppose if enough people are saying the same thing about someone, uh, there often can be some truth. You can't just be blinkered and say, well, funny's funny then. Um, you can still be friends with them, but professionally, you could be shooting yourself in the foot um, by by booking people who the industry deems to be a wrong 'un. I booked. I was really excited about it as well. I booked, and I've been trying for ages. I booked Tom Binns
Oh,
and Ivan Brackenbury. Yeah, I booked on in brilliant gigs, and I was really excited and thrown it out there. And then that news broke, and it just put a real kind of dampener on it. Um, and then you sort of find yourself taking the images off of your Facebook and all sorts because you don't know what you don't know what people how people perceive it. And it's a bit it's a bit of a weird one from a promoter's point of view. I'm not friends with him, but I was really excited when I booked him. It was after it was before the event. However, um, you just can't. Yeah, you just wouldn't book him now, would you?
no,
I wonder what
definitely.
would happen if you did. I'm not going to try, but he's still funny.
Oh,
Can't take that away from him.
no, 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 no. That would be suit. That is one thing that I would stay away from on any level. That
Yeah,
is that is
could set
that
up a new
is.
brand, Wrong'uns Comedy.
Oh,
Oh,
for
that would be
fuck's
good, wouldn't it?
sake!
Oh, let me write that down. Me and you. No, we're not the wrong ones, but no.
Bloody hell! No, 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 no. Let's stay
So are you
away.
saying that's a bad idea? But I've always learned, don't listen to other people. Do your thing.
I. That says every madman.
Yeah. Although there is something to be said for a night which has, well, I suppose comedy. Yeah, I suppose Unleashed do it, don't they? Really, they put people on. They don't care. Where do you stand on the Unleashed as a brand?
Um.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because most of the time they don't just say whatever they want. It's usually just, it's just a decent, a comedy night that's got a few things in it which maybe you wouldn't necessarily put on or encourage them to say at your own sleepy market town gig.
Yeah. It was branded itself for that. I mean, I know that a lot of people have. Hey, if they make a success of it and do well, then good on them. What other people do is, but I do hear from others. I've not really watched it enough, but what I hear from other comics and other people outside of it is just comedians doing a regular set, but it's being branded
Yeah,
as something controversial to attract the certain crowd in. But one thing that was a good thing that I learned from Kev Mudd, who's a former homeless person, he said something about when people are saying something controversial, he tries to see what is it you're trying to say? And he says if it's something that you wouldn't say to someone in a regular conversation,
mm.
maybe you should maybe think about whether you should say it or not.
Yeah, yeah, there is that, isn't there? I think so. If you wouldn't, yeah, why would you say it out loud in front of an audience of people? Um, if you don't necessarily believe it 100%. Um, I mean, you get that. I think a lot of audiences, if they're not expecting that, it is a platform for people to try out controversial opinions in the form of comedy. But outside of that bubble, I think audiences are generally triggered by certain words, topics, and themes, aren't they? And as soon as it doesn't matter how clever it is, sometimes you've lost half the room before you've even got to the point of something. They're squirming before you got to the punchline. Some acts are a bit like that. I book is Frank Sanasi. Have you come across Frank?
I want to get him on the podcast. I don't know why, but it's just something
Peter, yeah, I do.
interesting to talk about. But I just, yeah, I like it. No, I don't. I find it. Whoa, I got to be careful. No, it's
No, well,
funny.
you don't.
It's funny.
I
It's funny.
don't.
It's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I
funny.
mean,
It's funny.
He
It's funny.
wouldn't. Yeah, yeah. It is. It's funny. It's satire. It's in the same mold as the producers or whatever. However, um, he's the only act I think where you do get a little backlash from people who've never seen it, don't know what it is. But he's a brilliant, talented cabaret singer and um, character comedian. It is, there's not a lot in the act in terms of massive substance. It's a lot of puns and a lot of parodies of Frank Sinatra songs. Um, I think that's an example of an act that if you know you're going to, if you know you're signing up to it. For example, I wouldn't if he wasn't headlining. I've had him a couple of times down here over the years. If you just put him on to an audience that weren't expecting it, I think then you've got potential for people to
Oh,
complain. And I think if people know what they're going to go and see, it's a very different thing. It doesn't kind of attract the sort of audience that you might think it might attract. Uh, People come for a comedy night and they go away. Then some people aren't sure. I had a couple of people walk out, but um, the next time that I booked him, nobody walked out, which was brilliant. which was which was three. That's an improvement. But I think if people aren't expecting him, then yeah, you can see why they might find being having that forced upon them. But it's funny. It's hilarious. Cabaret, if you think of it as that.
I yeah. Well, what you said there about him and that one, I mean, and I remember hearing this in some sort of YouTube conference thing. They say that the more niche your topic is, the more successful it can be because it's so fixated to suit a certain audience. And that's what Comedy Unleashed have done in a way. They brand themselves, and that's one of the reasons why they're so successful with that brand. And yeah, I mean,
Hmm. Is it a niche?
and
Just
that what you
saying,
said there
yeah, yeah, go on.
is reminds me of Edinburgh in terms of the shows you produce there, in terms of being very fixated and tell people what they're going to get. Don't try and just market getting them in. Just be fixated. This is what you get. If you
Yeah,
don't like it, it's not for you.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. If you've got an audience of people who know I mean, he's in a position now. He's done it enough times that he sells out most of the run, uh, based on the fact that people kind of have been before. You know, that's their little stable. I discovered them in like a tunnel. It was the Iraq Pack, and just hilarious. It's the right side of wrong. Literally, yeah, it's the right side. It's on the right side of wrong. It's yeah. I mean, it is satire. It's silly. It's clowning. It's slapstick. It's all sorts of things. Um, but it is wrapped up with an image that people get triggered by. I had a complaint once, and it was from somebody who said, "I can't believe you're putting this on in the town," and she'd never seen it. She just saw it advertised, and instantly took a dislike. And I suppose that's the risk you run. It's not for everyone, but it's certainly not an act that I would worry about putting on. I don't think it tarnishes a brand. I haven't seen a massive or maybe, yeah, numbers are lower than they ever have been. But no, I don't think I have seen a massive backlash or anything. In fact, people asked for him to come back. That
Ah,
was that was the thing. Although I did have somebody who wanted to book him for a birthday party, um, or he wanted a comedy night, and he specifically wanted Frank, but then had second thoughts. Um, but luckily, I mean, Peter is he's got other characters. He's got Tom Moans, and yeah, he's got a few that he can do. But yeah, I think he had second thoughts because he didn't want to kind of upset his guests, I guess. So, so we've sort of changed the brief on that. But there, you know, it is. I'm not going to say it is what it is. It is very much something that you go to prepared to be offended if you are easily offended. Otherwise, yeah, I would say just book. If you are a promoter, just book it because it's unless you're that worried about what people might think, it's not. It's cabaret, in my opinion, and satire.
hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you
Have you
guys
seen
don't,
him live?
no, but I've seen them on YouTube.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Is this pretty much what you saw then?
It's great.
Yeah.
Ha- What's the what's the thing I wanted to say?
But what
Um,
you were saying though about the niche, there is something to be said for putting on cancelled comedians who maybe, um, like let's say what's his name, Linehan, for example, um, Andrew Lawrence again. There's another one, acts that were cancelled, but still have kind of a voice. Do you then alienate everybody um, because of that? That's the danger, isn't it? If you're a regular jobbing promoter, I suppose, putting on normal gigs, and then you suddenly spark that one out. You've got
yes, yes, yes. Well,
yeah,
that's what I hear with like Leo Kearse is a great comic, but he doesn't get as many gigs as he used to because he's on GB News.
yeah.
I
Another
know that
example. Yeah,
I know there's a comedian that I booked for a gig, and he told me that because he was associated with GB News, he stopped getting certain gigs. Um,
yeah.
the thing is, yeah, but this is the way it is, isn't it? It's human nature. We all like to be part of our groups, and there's pressure. If your friend that really hates certain people, there's pressure on you not to like him as well, even though you've had a good experience with them. And if you're, if
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. And I think most comedians who have been cancelled because they said something don't say it on stage. They haven't actually done that in the clubs. They've just said it on their social media. So most of them, their act doesn't follow that kind of, they've got material. They know that an audience, they're not using it as a platform to kind of force those opinions or force those thoughts. They they said something and then it escalates, doesn't it, on social media as these things do. But usually you'll find that for the most part, their act isn't like that at all. As a promoter, are you cancelling the person or are you cancelling their comedy or their, what they say? As a comedian, I think they're still, um, yeah, they're still bookable as comedians. Do you then say, but don't say that stuff, you know? Can you keep the, uh, I'm not even going to say the words, but can you keep that issue out of it? Yeah, just for your own good. How do they respond to that? Do they say, I can't promise that, or I
yeah,
haven't tried, but can you dictate what they say? Can you do the gig, but don't say anything about the what? I don't know if that's how how they'd respond, um, or how they would respond. But yeah, that's why we steer clear because we don't know what we're dealing with
yeah.
at the end of the day.
But it must be with all the stuff being as you run a lot of the bigger gigs, with all the political mumbo jumbo that goes on in comedy. How? it must be difficult for you to deal with as well because you're not always knowing well like which side is being truthful, which side is telling to complete porkies. And
What,
also if you don't do what certain people say, they try and cause you trouble, or some of them will even if you don't book them at the gigs, I'm guessing probably cause you trouble too.
when you say political mumbo jumbo, what what do you mean?
Like they say, not in the terms of the
Not in terms of the material. You mean in like the kind of
yeah,
politics of the industry and
yeah.
what goes in? Yeah.
I try and stay
Um,
away from that and book actors unless it's something horrific. Then obviously I've got to yeah,
yeah. I mean, there are some that you won't, but I'm in that sort of position where I never booked those acts previously anyway. So if you were if you were a regular booker of, let's say, Leo, and he says something that upsets people, and then you stop booking him, I mean, that's on you, isn't it? And there's a message there that you're putting out to the act, but I haven't ever booked him, so I guess I can be kind of I can sit back and not be affected by that,
no,
um, but I can continue not booking him. But there again, I'd have to book him to see him if I wanted to. So you do get into that sort of situation where acts maybe they'd like you to book them. You might have your reasons for not booking them, but I stay out of it as much as I can. I've never been that kind of person who's been um, drawn into infighting or situations like that. I play it quite safe. It has to be said. Um, if somebody tells me not to book someone and I trust them for whatever reason, um, yeah, I probably wouldn't if I know if I know the person who's telling me. But you hear these sort of murmurings going on in the in social media. Um, I mean, there's a bit going on at the moment, and maybe I won't talk about it, but
don't.
I think is it CB Murdoch? Have you seen him online lately? He has a brand of sort of military gigs that he puts on. He's been going for a good few years, and somebody's pretty much taken the brand image and doing the same thing. And he's rightly annoyed. I just wonder whether Axe will not work for the other guy based on that alone.
I
Does that
think
make sense? What I've
yeah,
said then?
I don't know. I've seen yeah, to be honest,
Were you listening?
yes, completely.
So-
I'm just unmovable at some kind. No, I 100% agree with that because he's basically committed copyright theft. I don't think that Axe will though. I think there's plenty that if they pay the right price, their morals go out the
yeah,
window.
yeah. And there was a lot going on with another promoter who was putting on dangerous gigs. They were deemed to be dangerous. And I can see that how if you're not actively looking at the internet um, and social media, you could miss that, and you might carry on feeding the brand or whatever. Um, but it was generally the general consensus was that this has to stop because yeah, there were some pretty sketchy gigs going on from this promoter, and I think there was some sort of physical interaction between a female act and a punter that wasn't taken seriously.
Oh,
Let's say, did you see that?
yes, I saw a screenshot
I
of it.
won't name names, but it was going on, and so I can see that being something to enforce. When other people phone up an act and say you don't want to work for that person because I've heard this happened, that's a difficult one, then, isn't it? That's happened in the past where people have tried to, um, yeah, influence you or tell you what you've got to do. I'm not the
I
sort of person that would then just go all out and do the opposite. I'll be honest. I'd like to, as I say, I'd probably play it safe.
mm,
But that's how you get cancelled these days, isn't it?
yeah, mm. It is what it is. Um, it is what it is. You just got to do. You got to keep your head above water, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, more than that, I think do what you do. I mean, I've got the acts that I book, and there are a lot of acts that want to be booked. Um, And I think some acts feel like they should be booked, and it's not because you don't like them. It's just because you kind of have you might have your favourites, or they might not be suitable. And I'm not at that stage as a promoter. I know I've been doing it for good few years, but I would rarely say no. I would rarely say no, you're not suitable. I just think that's I don't know what that says, whether that says more about me than it does about them. But that's a tough conversation, isn't it? I don't feel I'm in a position to tell comedians what they should and shouldn't do. I might suggest they keep the swearing down a bit, or don't do the stuff about the fisting, or whatever, because you might know the audience. They might take that on board. But yeah, I don't. I certainly don't want to dictate how an act should necessarily what material they should do, for example. But there again, I won't tell them that they're not suitable. I'm a bit weak like that. Does that make me a yeah? Does that make me bad? No,
No, that makes you
no,
avoiding the
just don't
trouble.
book them. Yeah, yeah. Just be honest, isn't it? Not for me. How do you do it? I don't know. Everyone has their way, I guess.
I say that.
I certainly don't. I don't feel like the gatekeeper. Although my gigs now I have a lot of gigs going on, and a lot of acts want to do them, and you just can't really. So I've sort of stopped blanket asking. I used to say, "Oh, sign up with your availabilities. Tell me what you've got," and I'd put down maybe 10 dates, and you get about 60 comedians all ticking it off, and then you realise what you've got is, yeah, 60 comedians, the majority of which you're not going to be able to book because you just don't have the gigs. So I've stopped doing that. That's for sure.
Ah,
Yeah, you just feel like you're then asking them to sign up and then ignoring them. No, I don't. Yeah, that's not the intention at all. Yeah, you don't want to be that guy.
can I get on then? I'm joking. I'm joking.
Well, I haven't seen you yet. What's it? Yeah, you're not for me. No. Did you say magic? No, no. They don't go with it. You'll have to come up some point. Definitely. I've got enough. The thing is, I've got enough gigs to sustain that now. But before, I used to have one pub gig or maybe two pub gigs, and yeah, you can't be all things to everyone, can you? You've got to you've got. But again, I sort of ignore them, which is again not the easiest way. It's not ignoring. It's just you can't physically get back to everyone, and it is yeah. You end up then leaving them hanging. But and I've got a few acts. I used to want to be nice to everyone, I suppose. So you'd say, "Oh yeah, 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 you should come up and do it," and then a couple of years later, you still haven't, and you feel quite bad about that. And there was, yeah, I think acts think that just when you say, "Yeah, you should come up," they expect you to book them there and then, or
Yeah,
straight away. They expect the email to be waiting. It doesn't quite work like that either. They get on your radar, and then I think the ones if the ones that are quite persistent and not too persistent are great for me because usually they'll contact me at a time when I'm looking at a diary with about 3 gigs to fill spots in. And so I highly recommend it. I don't want to be inundated with people now, but not that I would be. But if there were people I have promised gigs, so that's when you need to ramp up the persistence because the chance I'll be sat at my desk and they'll go, "Oh, what about that gig?" And I'll go, "Yes, can you do that one?" And that's when it's sorted. And that happened. That happened recently with Jacob Nussi. Nussi, Jacob. Do you know Jacob? Yeah. He said, "Can I get on your radar?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And then I had 2 gigs. I gave him back to back. That was that sorted. That's for next month. At the exclusion of acts that I probably should have maybe been attending to ahead of him. And it was just convenient, and that's sometimes what you need as well.
huh. Yeah, I heard that as well. There's a Northern Irish comedy promoter who says that a bad comedian who's persistent will get a million more times than a comedian who doesn't bother. Or
For the
who's not.
record, for the record, Jacob's. pretty good actually.
No, not him, but I'm just saying in
Yeah,
terms of.
I know what
Oh
you mean.
God, God, you wind, you got me there. You got me.
just, just can we put that out there? Um, yeah, he must be good. I booked him. No, but you're right. Yeah, the persistent ones will get more gigs. I mean, I've had one or two have done a gig, but then it was almost like having an insurance salesman after that. There was constantly leaving messages, and I just got fed up. It's kind of like in my own time. I think, yeah, sometimes you just do it when you can. Um, the one thing you said earlier about how you book gigs, being more organized is certainly it. But by my nature, I'm here, there, and everywhere at the best of times. I won't show the state of my desk, but I just, it just piles up. I know where everything is. Um, but yeah, they say be super organized, but you do kind of do it at, yeah, everyone does it differently. Some will be really super efficient. One day I might even have someone to do it for me. That would be lovely. But until that time comes, people just have to bear with. And
Okay.
yeah, it's a bit of an enigma, I suppose. Yeah. How do you get booked? Just keep yeah, just keep on trying. It's not because I don't like people or I don't like their act. Sometimes it is, of course, but um, yeah, I'm just a bit. I've got so many things going on. Sometimes it's always last minute. But there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone that's listening in right now, how do they find out about you, and what's the best way to get in contact or to get gigs with you?
Oh, so shaftofwit.com is the website. Shaftofwit.com. Um, if it's acts, it's booking at shaftofwit.com. If it's anything else, you can get yeah, just come through the website or just follow on Facebook as well. That's where I am very active. Facebook and Instagram, more so Facebook, but getting my head around the Instagram thing. It's a new thing now. The two are joined up. It's a little bit easier. Everything's now sort of feeding itself, isn't it? But yeah, Shaft of Wit comedy. I got hacked recently, and that made me realise just how reliant I'd become on Facebook.
Hmm.
If there are any other promoters or whatever out there who are heavily reliant upon one social media platform over any others, do yourself a favor because yeah, when I got hacked and sort of kicked off and it all went tits up, advertising and everything, I had to find some other way of getting the word out there. I put a big window stickers on my car, got flyers printed. I had to just go back to, it was like starting over again. I lost a page, but yeah, I would say that's really important. I had to have a really good think about what would happen if I got kicked off altogether, and it wouldn't. Yeah, yeah. If you rely on it that heavily, then yeah, you could have the rug pulled from under you. So it's all right now, though. Just about
Good.
shaft of wit comedy.
So you know where to go, guys. I'll give you his address later on. No,
Have we broken the internet, by the way? Uh,
no. But
uh,
I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys soon. Okay, take care, guys.